There was a deafening clap of thunder, and a bolt of lightning streaked across the sky. The dazzling light seemed as though it illuminated the entire world for a second, but it was instantly drowned into the endless darkness. Bean-sized raindrops began to fall, hitting the windows of the villa. The entire bedroom was filled with humidity. "What exactly do you want?" Timothy was drunk and impatient. He pushed Anya against the expensive marble wall. His calloused hands almost crushed her thin shoulders. Why was she so stubborn? He had never loved her. He had rarely touched her since they got married a year ago. Didn't she understand? "I want you," Anya cried out in pain. She looked at Timothy with tears in her face. "Timothy, I only want you." "You want me?" Timothy's eagle eyes suddenly shot out a cold light that made Anya tremble. "Fine." In an instant, he scooped up her small frame into his muscled arms and pushed her onto the bed. He then straddled her and started lining hot, drunken kisses up her leg until he got to her neck. Anya shook her head crazily and cried, "Timothy, what are you doing?" "Isn't this what you want?" Timothy's eyes were like sharp knives, piercing her as he peered up at her from her swan-like neck. Anya reached out her hand to push Timothy's chest, but found it to be useless. He was too strong. She knew she couldn't wriggle out of his grip, and at this point, she wasn't sure if she wanted to. His musk was so intoxicating that she was unable to pull away. She was trembling for his touch, his affection, and his love, but she was only to get one of those things. When Timothy lingered by her ear, she turned her head and closed the distance between them, guided by her own desires. They shared a kiss so passionate that it stunned the both of them. She had never felt so close to him in the whole year they had been together. Did that mean that he wanted to stay? That must be it. Anya pulled away and looked at him with longing, her arms encircled around his neck. Timothy, who had gotten carried away in the moment, came to a stop and looked at her through his dazed eyes. "Do you want me to stop?" he slurred. She was still so young and shy, and she couldn't put her feelings to words. She shook her head and only pulled him on top of her and began to unbutton his shirt. Her innocence moved him and stirred his already fiery blood. Intoxicated and eager, he gave in to her wishes and made love to his young bride. After they were through, Anya lay on his chest and felt his pounding heartbeat against her ear. This was bliss. She smiled and drew circles on his breast. Timothy, on the other hand, was finally sobering up enough to realize what had happened was horribly wrong. He took a look at his wife, and her joy made the thorn in his heart grow deeper inside. What had they done? Anya's shy voice broke the silence. "So, I guess you still want to be with me?" The prick in his heart intensified. Even his drunk self could comprehend the level of his transgression. He couldn't believe he was swayed by the sweetness of one woman and ended up betraying the one he loved. He quickly pulled her off him and sat up. "Anya, this was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened," he said gruffly, getting off the bed to get clothed. Her eyes went wide in horror as she followed his line of thought. "What do you mean? What about this is wrong? We're married." She trailed off weakly as her eyes started growing misty. Timothy dreaded looking at that broken-hearted young face. He hated himself for what happened, and how 3 people were wronged because of this drunken transgression. "I'm sorry if you were misled by this. I know we both wanted this at this moment, but we just can't be together. This doesn't change anything." "Why are you doing this to me?" Anya looked at Timothy, who seemed to have turned into a stranger. Anya would never have thought that on the day she graduated from college at the age of 21, her husband would give her such a graduation gift. In the past, Timothy only treated her coldly, but he had never tortured her like today. The coldness in his voice and eyes seemed to shatter her. "Why?" Anya looked at the huge crystal chandelier in the bedroom and kept repeating this sentence. However, Timothy did not answer her. Anya had never thought that the love she had been looking forward to in her heart would become like this. However, he refused to answer her. After receiving a call from a woman, Timothy left without hesitation. In fact, he departed with an urgency that heightened her grief. What did he owe this other woman? Anya lay on the bed, her eyes empty as she looked up at the ceiling. Her tears had dried up. Now Anya was finally willing to admit that Timothy did not love her from the beginning to the end. The reason why he married her was entirely because Timothy wanted to take charge of his father's company and force his ruthless stepmother and his half-brother, who had just graduated from high school, to leave. Now he had succeeded, so he didn't need her anymore. Her heart suddenly fell into the dust at this moment, like dead ashes. Anya sat up from the bed numbly. When she saw the divorce agreement on the table beside the bed, she stretched out her slender wrist and picked it up. The divorce agreement was written in great detail, mainly discussing the division of property. Timothy gave the property Anya deserved to her without hesitation. Anya smiled bitterly when she saw this. If only she cared about the property, she wouldn't be so sad. Anya picked up the pen and laid the papers out in front of her. She looked at it one more time and signed her name. Anya set the divorce agreement aside. She didn't even look at the check, just left the bedroom barefooted. 4 years later, in the Lynch family's villa, rows of milky white marble tables as smooth as mirrors and covered with red tablecloths were spread throughout a massive dining room. Delicious dishes of various colors were arranged neatly. The people who came and went were all aristocrats, the elites of the business world, greeting each other as they mingled. Anya had changed back to her maiden name of Radcliffe. She was wearing a flowing white dress that showed her wonderful figure. The dress was embroidered with exquisite handmade flower petals. The faint light made her feel as if she walked out of a sea of flowers. Every movement she made was elegant and sweet. She held a wine glass and looked at the guests coming and going at the banquet. Her heart was excited. Today was the birthday banquet of Leslie Lynch, the son of the head of the jewelry industry. Sunderby Styles, the fashion company Anya worked for, was trying to make a deal to collaborate with the Lynch's family corporation. As an employee of Sunderby Styles, she was fortunate enough to attend this banquet with the company's executives. Normally, as a newly transferred fashion designer, she would not be qualified to attend such a high-class banquet. However, Anya's work was chosen by the owner, Darren Sunderby. He personally transferred her from a subsidiary company in Serene City to the headquarters of the company in Harburton. He planned to assign her an important task after her internship ended. 4 years ago, after she signed the divorce agreement with Timothy, she fled from Harburton to Serene City. There, she relied on her hard work to support her and her son, Anton. Now, in order to realize her dream and earn more money, she once again returned to the city she had abandoned. Thinking of this, Anya's eyes dimmed. Timothy was in Harburton. Now, Anya was afraid that Timothy would snatch away her son. Even if she did not like to watch the news, she knew that 4 years ago, after he divorced her, he married Melissa Zeller. However, fate was very strange. Although Timothy had money and power and deeply loved his current wife, they had been infertile and so far unable to have children. Anya was worried that if Timothy discovered Anton's existence, he and that woman might try to take her son. This absolutely could not happen. Anya furrowed her pretty brows. Her son Anton was her everything. No one could take him away from her. Anya took a deep breath and tried her best not to let her imagination run wild. "Oh, Anya, why are you standing here? Come with me and greet some of these important guests." David Hendricks, Sunderby's Styles vice president, urged her. "Okay, I will go with you now." Anya nodded timidly. She followed behind David. David turned his head and looked at the beautiful Anya before, walking toward the group of laughing and joking executives. Anya tried her best to wear a sweet smile on her face and elegantly followed behind him. "Derek Weston! Long time no see." David had a flattering smile on his face as he clinked his glass with the fierce-looking president of a rival fashion company. Derek smiled at David, then looked around and saw Anya. Anya's white dress revealed her smooth shoulders and exquisite neck. Anya also had strikingly beautiful eyes. When she smiled, it was hard for people to look away. Her straight nose and soft and smooth lips made a perfect face. Derek's eyes lit up. He took the initiative to ask David, "Who is your lovely companion?" "This is our company's new fashion designer. Darren Sunderby saw her work and promoted her." David saw Derek was interested in Anya, so he quickly leaned to the side and signaled Anya to come and speak to him. "Hello, Mr. Weston. My name is Anya." Anya reached out her hand and shook hands with Derek, introducing herself gracefully. "Derek heads one of the biggest clothing suppliers in the country," David said as he introduced him to Anya quietly from the side. Anya immediately understood. She walked forward to introduce herself and clinked glasses with Derek as she spoke. "I hope we can have a pleasant cooperation with you in the future." David saw Derek smiling happily, so he said, "You guys talk first. I will go over there and say hello to Lee Hayworth." After David left, Derek took a step forward and invaded Anya's personal space. "Miss Radcliffe, this is my business card." "Thank you, Mr. Weston." Anya quickly took the card in her hand and put it away. At the same time, she maintained an encouraging smile on her face, while her body subconsciously took a step back to keep a certain distance from Derek. After a round of conversation, Anya had allowed Derek to have a deeper understanding of Sunderby's styles. At the same time, he had also discovered that Anya was not a fake beauty. In fact, was quite intelligent, causing him to look at her in a different light. Now, Anya and Derek both received some useful information. Anya politely took her leave from him and walked towards David. Anya put down her wine glass and took a deep breath. She had chatted with him for so long, and the conversation had not been in vain. "How was it?" David saw Derek leave and quickly leaned forward to ask. Anya replied modestly, "Mr. Weston said if we sincerely cooperate and increase the numbers of orders appropriately, he will provide us with textile materials at a price lower than the market by 8%. "Very good." David nodded in satisfaction. "Our company is currently planning to increase the production volume. The orders given to Derek will definitely increase. Now that the price of the textile materials has become lower, our company's profits will also increase. Anya, your performance was quite good. You will take responsibility for Derek's account." David had always been good at selecting and hiring the right people. Now that Anya had performed so well, he would, of course, reward her. After that acknowledgement, Anya went with David and talked to a few reputable bosses, during which Anya continued to be an asset. Finally, Anya had seen most of the important people. Anya had also drank a lot of wine. She felt that her smile had frozen in place. She greeted David and planned to go to the bathroom to touch up her makeup on the second floor of the Lynch's villa, in the Lynch family's private bathroom. Timothy kept patting Melissa's back. He was a little worried as he watched her lower her head and throw up. He asked, "Melissa, do you feel better?" The only thing that answered Timothy was a light-hearted wrenching sound of vomiting. Melissa covered her chest, and her thin brows were slightly knitted. Her originally cherry-like red and small lips were slightly pale. Because of the constant throwing up, Melissa's beautiful eyes were filled with tears. Her smooth cheeks were slightly pale, which made Timothy's heart ache. "Timothy, don't be too anxious. Mel's just not feeling well." Melissa's cousin, Heath, was the manager of Godot's group marketing department, and he was also Melissa's personal butler. Although the worry on his face was no less than Timothy's, he continued comforting Timothy. "I should have let Melissa rest at home. I know that she is very weak, but I still let her come." Timothy looked at Melissa, who was clearly feeling unwell, and his tone was incomparably vexed. "It's all right." Melissa raised her pale face, looked at Timothy, forced a smile, and said with understanding, "Timothy, I feel much better. Don't worry about me." Before Melissa finished speaking, she immediately lowered her head and vomited again. She painfully held her chest and continued retching. Melissa had not had good rest the previous night, plus the activity of the day had been a little more than expected. Because it was a banquet, she had eaten more than normal. So she, who was already in bad health, now was experiencing some gastrointestinal issues. "Melissa, let's go home immediately. I'll call your private doctor over." Timothy went forward and put his arm around Melissa's shoulder. He lowered his head and looked at her gently and said, "No need," Melissa replied, before she began to vomit again. Then she looked up at Timothy and said, "This is a banquet for your good friend. I cannot be the one to ruin it." "Timothy, Mel is right. After all, this is a birthday party for your good friend. She is your wife. She should have come. Don't blame yourself too much." Heath comforted Timothy in a compassionate tone. From time to time, he looked at his hand that was holding Melissa's shoulder. His eyes revealed his personal internal conflict. "But Melissa, I'm really worried about you like this." Timothy shook his head and patiently advised, "We should go home." The clipped sound of high heels hitting the ground interrupted Melissa's response. Anya, who was somewhat drunk, had seen several people in line for the restroom on the first floor. She wanted to refresh herself immediately, so she fumbled to the restroom on the second floor. She vaguely saw 3 figures standing in the washroom through her semi-drunk haze. Timothy was worried about Melissa's physical condition, so he did not pay attention to who the person was. He only turned his head to look at Heath and signaled for him to direct the person elsewhere. Heath nodded to Timothy and walked toward Anya. "Miss, this restroom is for private use only. Please find another for your use," Heath said seriously as he stepped in front of Anya and blocked her way. "Why is this man here?" Anya blinked her drunk eyes and ignored Heath's words. She pointed at him and said, "This man should go find another restroom." At this time, Melissa's chest hurt so much that she turned her head to look at the beautiful woman who was arguing with Heath in the distance. She suddenly felt unhappy in her heart. She looked up at Timothy and said in a delicate voice, "Timothy, that woman is so unreasonable." "Don't be angry. I will chase her out immediately." Timothy patted Melissa's back gently to comfort her. He turned around and walked toward Anya. Timothy only showed a gentle smile to Melissa. In front of others, he was always as cold as ice. Therefore, before Timothy stepped in front of Anya, he said coldly, "Get out." Anya, who was arguing with Heath, heard such arrogant words and laughed. She looked at the person who came and asked casually, "What if I don't want to leave?"